This two-part video series will examine the early church and what they taught about the heretic Marcion. We will also see what the church thought about Paul in light of what Marcion believed. Now, Marcion was considered a heretic by all of the early church. He was written against by many early church fathers. Many of his heresies were discussed in letters by these early church writers. And today we're just going to look at one or two of them, and we're doing that because Marcion was a follower of what he believed the Apostle Paul was teaching. So Marcion was one of the first major heretics in the church. Marcion taught that the God of the Old Testament is a different God than the God of the New Testament. That is very important. Marcion taught that the God of the Old Testament is a different God than the God of the New Testament. Marcion believed that Paul taught the commandments were abolished. Let's remember the early church deemed Marcion a heretic. Now, we know that John's direct disciple was Polycarp. Polycarp was appointed as bishop to the church in Smyrna by the apostles themselves. He was also martyred. This is a source we can trust. And if you recall, at the time when John wrote the Revelation, the letter from Jesus Christ himself, or Yeshua Christ himself, gave zero rebuke to the church in Smyrna. Polycarp was bishop at the time that this letter was written. He had a direct disciple as well named Irenaeus. We're going to examine a few quotes by Irenaeus about Marcion. We're going to look at what Marcion believed according to Irenaeus. And here's what Irenaeus says. With regard to those, the Marcionites, who alleged that Paul alone knew the truth, and that to him the mystery was manifested by revelation, let Paul himself convict them when he says that one and the same God wrought in Peter for the apostolate of the circumcision, and in himself for the Gentiles. Peter, therefore, was an apostle of that very God, whose was also Paul. And him whom Peter preached as God among those of the circumcision, and likewise the Son of God, did Paul declare also among the Gentiles. So Irenaeus makes the case that Paul is preaching the same God to the Gentiles that Peter preaches to the Jews. There's only one God. And here's another quote. And that the Lord did not abrogate the natural precepts of the law by which man is justified, which also those who were justified by faith and who pleased God did observe previous to the giving of the law. And here he's referring to those like Abraham before the law was given at Sinai to Moses. They did observe the laws of God before the laws were written down. And you will find that if you go read your Bible. Here we see, they pleased God. They did observe previous to the giving of the law, but that he extended and fulfilled them is shown from his words. For, he remarks, it has been said to them of old time, do not commit adultery. But I say unto you that everyone who hath looked upon a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. And again, it has been said, thou shalt not kill. But I say unto you, everyone who is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And it has been said, thou shalt not forswear thyself. But I say unto you, swear not at all, but let your conversation be yea, yea, and nay, nay, and other statements of the like nature. For all these do not contain or imply an opposition to and an overturning of the precepts of the past, as Marcion's followers do strenuously maintain, but they exhibit a fulfilling and extension of them. So Irenaeus is clear that Yeshua did not overturn the law or the commandments, but that he fulfilled them. And if you look up the word fulfill, it means to fill to the full. So before Yeshua came, there was the letter of the law. After he came, we see what that meant. It was filled up to the full. Now, not only do you not commit murder, you do not hate. Now, not only do you not commit adultery, but you also do not lust in your heart. It was filled to the full. He is the grace and the truth. He's the perfect example. The law is actually God's perfect standard, which is Yeshua. And now we see Yeshua actually living it out. We see a complete picture of what the law is. It's Yeshua. He's the grace and truth of it. Now here are some quotes by Tertullian, another early church father, talking about Marcion. He says, Marcion acquired his very perverse opinions not from a master, meaning not even from a teacher, like Paul, but his master from his opinion. He displayed a hatred against the Jews' most solemn day. He was only professedly following the Creator as being his Christ in this very hatred of the Sabbath. So he says Marcion hates, he hates the Sabbath because it points to the God of the Old Testament, who he believed to be a different God than the God of the New Testament, Yeshua. And it's very obvious from Yeshua that he was Lord of the Sabbath. And so Tertullian is pointing this out. Marcion really tried to differentiate between the Jews and the Christians. That was his big thing, was to differentiate and to try to do away with all things Jewish, because he believed there were two different gods. And here's another quote. Christ did not at all rescind the Sabbath. He kept the law thereof, and both in the former case did a work which was beneficial to the life of his disciples, for he indulged them with the relief of food when they were hungry, and in the present instance cured the withered hand, in each case intimating by the facts, I came not to destroy the law, but to fulfill it, although Marcion has gagged his mouth by this word. For even in the case before us, he fulfilled the law while interpreting its condition. Moreover, he exhibits in a dear light the different kinds of work, while doing what the law accepts from the sacredness of the Sabbath, meaning he was able to satisfy the hunger of his disciples and do healing, and while imparting to the Sabbath day itself, which from the beginning has been consecrated by the benediction of the Father, an additional sanctity by his own beneficent action. For he furnished to this day divine safeguards, a course which his adversary would have pursued for some other days, to avoid honoring the Creator's Sabbath and restoring to the Sabbath the works which were proper for it. Since in the like manner the prophet Elisha on this day restored life to the son of the Shunammite woman. You see, O Pharisee, and you see too, O Marcion, how that it was proper employment for the Creator's Sabbath of old to do good, to save life, not to destroy it. How that Christ introduced nothing new, which was not after the example, the gentleness, the mercy, and the prediction also of the Creator. So again, Tertullian is saying there are different kinds of work. There are some things that are made specifically to honor the Sabbath. You can do those things. Those are things that are exempted by the sacredness of the law. You restore the Sabbath by doing good things, by healing and correcting. Now, I'm going to save the next bit, which is interesting, a quote from Tertullian, and we'll wrap up with what the early church fathers also thought about Paul when you see what they were saying about Marcion. Stay with me for part 2.